Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I want to take a look at the F1 Constructors Championship with 6 races to go. Obviously, a couple races ago, I believe in Azerbaijan, McLaren actually passed Red Bull in the Constructors Championship to lead that Constructors Championship for the first time since I believe Australia 2014, which of course was actually the first race in the turbo hybrid era. So long time coming for McLaren. But that being said, 6 races left in the season. I do still think we have a pretty interesting fight in the constructors amongst the top 4 teams. You can make a good argument that Mercedes is not really in that group and that they're kind of going to be stuck in 4th place for the rest of the year. But just for the purposes of this video, I decided to include them in there because they are really one of the kind of 4 teams in that lead pack. So first, taking a look at just the current constructor standing. So we have McLaren first, 516 points, split amongst their 2 drivers. Norris, of course, ahead, 279 points. Oscar Piastri, their kind of second driver, 237 points. Second in the Constructors Championship is Red Bull, 475 points, so already about 40 odd points or so behind McLaren. Max Verstappen, obviously their lead driver with the bulk of their points, 331 points for the Dutchman, with Sergio Perez only on 144 points, which of course is the lowest in that top 8 group, in that top 4 group. Third, Ferrari, 441 points, actually pretty close to Red Bull. I think that is going to be the real fight in that last 6 races for the Constructors Championship about whether or not Ferrari can get themselves ahead of Red Bull before the end of the season. Lead driver Charles Leclerc, 245 points. Carlos Sainz second, 190 points. Of course, I shouldn't forget Oliver Behrman's also scored points for Ferrari. 6 points for him scored at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Then you have Mercedes down in 4th by over 100 points, 239 points for them. Hamilton, their lead driver, 174. But Russell not too far behind on 155. Now, before we kind of look and get into these stats I've kind of brought out for this video, let's take a look at the last 6 races that we have for this calendar. Actually, and honestly, the ending of the 2024 season from a scheduling perspective, pretty poor, I feel. Obviously, we're in the middle of this 4-week break right now, and then we have 2 triple headers to finish off the year. First, we have the United States Grand Prix at COTA, October 20th, the Mexican Grand Prix, October 27th, and then the Brazilian Grand Prix, November 3rd. Then we have a 3-week break till the Vegas Grand Prix, Las Vegas Grand Prix, November 23rd, Qatar, December 1st, and rounding out the season at Abu Dhabi on December 7th. So not a great finish to the season scheduling-wise. Month break, triple header, 3-week break, another triple header. And of course, of those 6 races, 3 of them are sprints, and that of course will be in COTA, Brazil, and in Qatar. And just kind of going through each track and saying which car I think would be probably the favorite at each of those tracks. For COTA, I would say definitely McLaren. There's enough high-speed corners there, but Verstappen's also historically been very good at that track as well. Hamilton too. So yeah, I'd say watch out for those drivers there. Mexico, of course, that's a track that Verstappen has been very good at historically, but not so sure how they're going to do there, as it is a high downforce track because of the high altitude. So with Red Bull, actually, what I've noticed the last kind of 9 races or so is that on tracks where it's either one extreme or the other, so high downforce or low downforce. So for example, Singapore on the one end, although Singapore, Red Bull is actually much better than expected. Monza, the other extreme, low downforce. Red Bull generally tend to not do as well, and they generally seem to be better at tracks where you actually need to find a compromise between aero and straight line speed, like basically cornering speed and straight line speed. Verstappen should be alright there, but a lot of slow speed corners, so I think Ferrari might be strong there as well. Then you have Brazil. I feel like that's going to be a track that McLaren's probably going to be pretty decent at. Red Bull, not so sure, but again, lots of high speed corners, a couple medium speed, slow speed corners as well there. Then we have Vegas, very cold. Is what the temperature should be, and again, lots of slow corners, so I think Ferrari should be strong, and for whatever reason, Mercedes just tend to be much better at this colder tracks. So perhaps Mercedes will do well there as well. Then you finish with Qatar, lots of high-speed, medium-speed corners. I think that's going to be a McLaren landslide. And then you finish the season with Abu Dhabi, lots of slow-speed corners, a track Verstappen's won the last 4 races of, I believe. So I think Verstappen should be strong there, but Ferrari should be decent as well at that track. So again, a mix of tracks, some high speed, low speed, some tracks in between. So I don't think that there's any one specific type of track that is really predominant in those last 6 races. It's a real mix of tracks, which I think is more exciting for us. I don't think the schedule really favors anyone in particular. Although if I had to say it favored one car over another, I would say just McLaren, because they're overall the strongest car in F1 right now. Now, going over to looking at these stats. So basically, I've gotten stats that I think are good representative measures of how strong the cars are in both qualifying trim and in race trim. I have their totals for the 18 races we have so far this season, and I've also split it up into the first 9 races, so from Bahrain to Canada, I believe, and then from Spain all the way to last time out in Singapore, just so that you can kind of see the contrast and see the development race and how that's played out in terms of the pecking order at the front of the field. And then of course you just have a very, very simple statistic at the bottom, and that is wins, which is what we're going to start on. So Constructors Championship leader McLaren's only 5 wins this year. It kind of feels strange to say only 5 wins, but usually by this time your Constructors Championship leader would have more than 5 race wins. In the first 9 races, they only had that 1 win, which was of course Norris's win in Miami. But since then, they've won 4 races, and of course 3 of the last 4. They've won the Dutch Grand Prix, Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Singapore Grand Prix, and of course the Hungarian Grand Prix as well. Then you have Red Bull, which of course is going to be one of the more dramatic teams on this board in terms of the differential between the first 9 races to second 9 races. So they have 7 wins so far this season, which is most of any team. Not sure if they're going to hold on to that title as we get to the end of the season, as they haven't won a race since the Spanish Grand Prix, which was in June. But 6 race wins out of the first 9 races, but only 1 race win in the last 9 races. Then you have Ferrari. Of all the teams on the board, probably the most balanced in this particular regard. 3 race wins, 2 in the first 9 races, Australia and Monaco. Australia helped a bit by Max Verstappen's brakes exploding, but also won Monaco, which was definitely on pace. And then they of course won the Italian Grand Prix in the second 9 races. Then you have Mercedes, 3 race wins this year, same as Ferrari. No wins in the first 9 races, but they did win 3 races out of 4 in the European leg of the season. They won Austria somewhat fortuitously through Norris and Verstappen crashing into each other. Won the British Grand Prix. Combination of pace, they did have a 1-2 in qualifying and good strategy as well. And they also won the Belgian Grand Prix, which would have been a 1-2 for the team if George Russell had not been disqualified. So definitely I would say stronger second half of the season for McLaren, and that's something that we'll definitely see as we look at the other 2 statistics for qualifying and for race pace. I would say Ferrari and Red Bull definitely stronger in the first half of the season, or first 9 races. McLaren and Mercedes stronger in the second 9 races. So first with qualifying gap statistic, and this is average pole gap. So basically you just take a gap between pole position and whatever the lead car was, so you don't have to worry about, for example, in Red Bull's case, Perez's qualifying position performance is really weighing them down, because really it's the gap between pole and what Verstappen gets in qualifying. Of course, unless it's Baku, in which case it's the other way around. And of course, if you get pole, then it's just a 0. But looking at the pole statistics, so for McLaren, 0.256 seconds was your average pole gap so far this season. Red Bull lead the top 4 teams, 0.113 seconds, so just a bit more than a tenth. Then you have Ferrari, 0.383 seconds, that's third among this group. And then you have Mercedes, who are last, 0.454 seconds, so 4.5 tenths a second pretty far off pole. Now, when you split this in the first 9 races and the second 9 races, you definitely see some big differences. So, for McLaren, first 9 races, 0.317 seconds, which still ranks second, but miles off what Red Bull was doing in the first 9 races. Then in the second 9 races, 0.195 seconds, which is just a hair slower than Red Bull, but Red Bull's qualifying performances at the Belgian Grand Prix, where Verstappen took pole and then obviously took an engine penalty, that definitely weighs McLaren's total and all these teams' totals down quite a bit, given that Verstappen was so dominant in qualifying in that one specific session. But yeah, you can see McLaren definitely faster in qualifying second half of the season compared to first half. Then you have Red Bull, first 9 races, 0.033 seconds. Remember, they took the first, I believe, six or seven pole positions of the year. It wasn't until Monaco where Verstappen didn't take a pole position. So they were basically just outright dominant in qualifying to start the season. But second 9 races, average pole gap, 0.194 seconds. Still fastest amongst the top 4 teams, but only by a fraction. And really, if you just did it based on number of pole positions, McLaren would be ahead. Then you get to Ferrari, 0.332 seconds in the first 9 races. That gets a little bit worse in the second 9 races, 0.434 seconds, which is actually slowest of these 4 teams, which is actually, compared to how Ferrari have been the last 3-4 years, they've generally been quite good in qualifying, able to get pole positions, but not able to have the race pace tire management to convert those pole positions into race wins. So a little bit kind of the opposite of what we normally would expect for Ferrari. Then you get to Mercedes, first 9 races, average pole gap 0.502 seconds, and they've improved by almost 1/10 of a second in those second 9 races, and that total has improved to 0.406 seconds. So in qualifying trim, still overall for the whole season so far, Red Bull are on top in that regard. But basically, second 9 races, Red Bull, McLaren basically dead even in that. And I would expect, if I recalculate this again at the end of the season and did first 12 races, second 12 races, McLaren would definitely be ahead by the end of the season. Now, moving on to the race pace, and that's obviously what in theory is more important in the context of the championship. And this is a stat that I like to use. It's one that I devised myself, and that is average minimum finishing position. So kind of like what I alluded to with the average pole gap, this statistic basically is you take every single race in your data set, so basically from Bahrain all the way to Singapore, and you take the lead driver's result from that race. So for example, for Red Bull, it would be 1-1-1. It would be 1-1 for the first 2 races, and then for Australia, it would have been Perez's result because he was the lead driver. In cases where both drivers DNF, that weekend's just scrapped. There's no point in including that weekend, but still, I find it's a pretty helpful way to look at what teams are best in terms of race pace. Now, for average minimum finishing position for the season as a whole, McLaren are ahead in this metrics. 2.33 is their average for the whole season. For Red Bull, they come out second, 2.83, and then Ferrari third, 3.06, and Mercedes fourth, 4.24. So interestingly, we're in qualifying. Red Bull are still ahead for the season average. McLaren are already ahead of McLaren are already ahead of Red Bull in this particular metric. Now, when you divide that into first 9 races, second 9 races, you get a pretty big difference. So first 9 races, McLaren 3.00, second 9 races 1.67, and that's basically pretty close to dominant. Basically, if you look at all the years from 2008, I believe, all the way up to now, if you can have anything below 2, you'll pretty much dominate, guaranteed to win the Constructors Championship. And it's a very, very dominant team usually. So basically, second 9 races of the season, McLaren have been very, very strong. Red Bull, first 9 races, 2.11. So again, not even as dominant as McLaren the last 9 races, but you have races like Monaco where Verstappen was the lead driver in 6, and you have races like Australia where, of course, Verstappen DNF'd, and Perez was the lead driver in 5th, which will be bringing that number down. But for Red Bull, 2.11 for the first 9 races, 3.56 for the second 9 races, which is actually worst of these 4 teams on board. Then you have Ferrari first 9 races 2.63, so honestly not that far off Red Bull and better than McLaren. Second 9 races 3.44, which again worse than McLaren, worse than Mercedes, but better than Red Bull. And then you have Mercedes, who have made, I would say, just in terms of pure numbers, the biggest turnaround. First 9 races 5.50, second 9 races 3.11. And that, of course, is second of these 4 teams. So again, you can really see the contrast between first 9 races, second 9 races, where you have a lot more momentum for McLaren, a lot of momentum for Mercedes. But, if you looked at just recently, last 3-4 races, Ferrari have definitely come on pretty strong, especially since we've kind of gone away from the European races. We've had, Italy, Azerbaijan, Singapore. I think obviously for Ferrari, Singapore was a bit of a letdown. They probably should have been a bit better. But they've definitely kind of improved a bit the last month or so, whereas Mercedes have struggled basically since the summer break. So really just kind of wrapping up this video, talking about how I think things are going to shake out for the Constructors Championship, looking at these trends and everything. So I think for the Constructors Championship, I think McLaren are in an excellent position to win. Not saying they're guaranteed to win, but very, very good chance. 2 drivers performing very well. They kind of have a lot of positive momentum in terms of these statistics, as in the fact that they're the fastest team on track right now. And I think operationally, even though I think strategically, I think they've made some mistakes. Perhaps Norris is leaving some points on the board, but a lot of those weekends Piastri is picking up the pieces, winning those races like Baku, for example. So I think in that regard, McLaren I think have an excellent chance of winning Constructors, and they're definitely my pick at this point in the season. For second in the Constructors, I think it's a bit trickier, but I think at this point Ferrari do look like they're the stronger package, and with Perez continuing to underperform as he has most of the season, I do think that Sainz at least is picking enough points off of Perez that even if Verstappen and Leclerc are basically even in terms of points from here on until the end of the season, I think they should be able to make up that 34-point deficit between now and Abu Dhabi. So I'm predicting Ferrari second in the Constructors, and I'm actually going to go with Red Bull third in the Constructors. And that, of course, leaves Mercedes. I guess if Ferrari had an absolute disaster over the last 6 races and Mercedes were able to find the form that they had in the British Grand Prix, Belgian Grand Prix, as well as the not necessarily Austrian Grand Prix, but basically those first 2 Grand Prix that I mentioned, if they're able to find that form again magically, and they're able to both consistently get really good podium results, for example, they in theory could overturn that deficit to Ferrari, but I don't really see that happening. So I do think that the Mercedes are going to stay in 4th in the Constructors Championship. So there you go. There's my look at the Constructors Championship in that battle as we get into the last 6 races of the season. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more and you hadn't already, please like and subscribe. It really helps out. The last couple of videos have actually done pretty well, despite the fact that we're kind of in this fall break period. And yeah, a couple more fun videos planned between now and the US Grand Prix, which as of recording this video is in about just less than 3 weeks time. So again, not quite halfway through the fall break yet, but we're definitely getting there. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.